This next holster is going to be for a 3-inch K-frame. It's a Smith & Wesson Model 65, which doesn't have a adjustable rear sight. So I got, this is actually a Model 10 blue gun, Model 10 with the bull barrel, which pretty much is exactly the shape of a Model 65. His is 3 inches, so I had to cut an inch off of this one, and I took a piece of wood and glued it up here and wrapped a piece of electrical tape around it to, you know, take the place of the sight. Normally, if I need to make like a 3-inch or a 2.5 inch, in fact, let me show you here. This is a 3-inch holster, and normally I would just have it extending out the bottom of the holster. But this one is going to be closed on the bottom, so I had to cut it off, you know, so it fit right. But basically, I started out, I already had a pattern for a 4-inch K-frame. I put that on this piece of paper, like that, and traced around it. He wants an open trigger guard. Oops. An open trigger guard, so I drew that in, and I used my circle gauge to make the bottom of the curve. I think it was this one right there. And for these other curves, like this piece that's going to go in the front to protect the gun from the snaps, so when you draw the gun out, it's not getting scratched by the backside of the snaps. I just use my bendy curve. Just bend it to the shape I want. Like that. And then just draw around it. I don't know if you can see all my little erased lines and stuff, but I changed designs quite a few times on here until finally I think I like the way this is. It's gonna have a welt on it, because basically I like the way a welt looks. There's a lot of people that order a holster and say, I want a holster just like that one. So I go ahead and I put a welt on it. You can see on the back side here, it comes up past the center line, because you got to compensate for the thickness of the leather. And on this side where the welt's going to be, it comes up just about to the center line, because the welt's going to be 1/8 of an inch, and it's going to help fill that space. Let me show you on this one. Maybe you can see better. This one is for a 4-inch K-frame, so of course it's going to be a bit long, but still you can see how that goes past the center line. This one was welted also. And it goes just about, well actually, where the welt would go comes about to the center line. Revolvers have curves, which makes them a little bit more of a challenge to make a pattern for. Your typical semi-auto is just mostly flat-sided, so you can measure how wide it is, add the width of the leather, and there you go. But with the revolver, you got to be a little bit more dynamic. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and cut this out, and let's do a mock-up of it in paper and see how it looks. Now that I've got this one cut out, and you can basically see how it's going to fit, the revolver's going to fit right in there, about like that. Maybe back just a little bit. Strap's going to come across here and snap onto there. And there's lots of room to close off the bottom. It's going to have a welt too, so they'll leave it lots of room. Yeah, it's going to fit just right. a lot of this stuff you gotta like visualize and think, you know, okay, the leather's gonna be about that thick, so it's gonna sit right about there. But you can basically get an idea of how it's gonna fit. Now the next step, I'm going to take this piece of red paper here and fold it over. Oh, that's another thing. I've seen people online making patterns for handguns and such. And they'll take a piece of paper, and then they'll take and they'll put the gun on the crease, and then they'll go like this. Trace around it, put it back on the crease, go like that, and trace around it. Basically, when I make a pattern, I fold it over. This is going to be the back side of the holster. That's how I start. But for this one, like I mentioned before, I already had a pattern for it. So I just went ahead and used that one. But right now, I'm going to go ahead, and now this is folded over, I'll just place this over top of it and trace around it. Now the reason I'm doing that is because this piece here, this needs to be a separate piece. It needs to be its own pattern. So I'm going to trace around this, make another pattern, exact copy of this, and then cut that out. And that'll be a whole separate pattern. Basically, just take a pencil, make sure it's snug against the edge here. And just trace around it. Kind of like you would when you're transferring the pattern onto leather, except you're transferring a paper pattern, well, onto another piece of paper. Whoop. Okay, bring this back down, make sure everything is lining up on this side, and it is. Now go ahead and trace the back side. Now I prefer a mechanical pencil for making my patterns. You can basically use whatever kind of pencil you want. Doesn't really matter. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut this out, and then cut this piece out, and we'll see what we end up with. Okay, that's all cut out, stapled together. I taped another piece of paper on here, you know, to make it longer so it'll fold over. But this is a paper mock-up, and you can see how the gun's going to fit in there. And this will come over here. It's just right here. Okay, that's going to come across there, and I drew two little circles where the snaps are going to be. But that's the pattern. Now all we got to do is get it approved, and then I'll pull all those staples out and get to cutting leather. Alright. You can see how it fits in there. And it's got the closed bottom and the retention strap. And the clip, oh, where'd it go? Oh, there it is. It's going to go on the back side. And I'm going to make another pattern for the piece of leather that the clip's going to go on. But basically, that's it. And that pattern, well, once I get approval on it, that pattern's done.